abilities and the desires of population. So you need to stay local and need to think local in order to be effective. I do want to say that not all solutions are local or state. And of course, putting a price on carbon is a national approach, very consistent and beneficial to driving in many of the solutions we'll be talking about today. But I'm going to talk about the research methodologies we used to identify what's going to be amenable for Georgia. The starting point is the study led by Paul Hawken, who's an environmentalist, who wrote a book called Drawdown that's a New York Times bestseller. And in it there, I at one point had all 100 solutions shown on this page, and Henry said, no, that's the font's too small, can't read it. So just keep in mind that the solutions come in a variety of packages. And so, for example, some of the big ones from the Project Drawdown project were refrigerant management, that actually was number 1 on the global list, tropical forest restoration, et cetera. So in addition to looking at Project Drawdown and its solutions, we also have examined the climate goals and the climate plans that are in place across the country. 25 US governors have committed to meeting the goals of the Paris Accord. 2 of these governors are located in what's traditionally called the Southeast, that is North Carolina and Louisiana. Louisiana just passed an executive order in late 2020. There are no details on their plans at this point, but they're under development. For the state of North Carolina, the goals were set in 2018, and there's quite a bit of material on what their plans are, including a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% below 2005 levels by the year 2025. It's a very ambitious goal that's been set up by their Climate Change Interagency Council. So we didn't stop there. We also listened to a lot of people. The team held meetings, webinars. We had a survey of experts, surveys of average Georgians that we put out on the Racy Anderson website and the Georgia Tech website. So we engaged about 200 experts from across the state and trying to figure out what might be best for Georgia to make Georgia carbon neutral. And in terms of a systematic analysis of options, starting with the 100 that Project Drawdown had identified for the world, we first eliminated about 25 of them because they were not relevant to Georgia. For instance, the tropical rainforest solutions. We didn't go any further in looking at what they might be able to deliver. We ended up examining about 75 of them in great detail, and you'll find material on our analysis posted on my Georgia Tech website, which you'll see a reference to in the last slide. But the step-down selection process first asked the question, well, is it ready? Is the technology ready for the marketplace? And quite a few solutions fell out at that point. An obvious one, for instance, fusion energy. It's always 50 years away, I think is the estimate. It's been 50 years away every decade that I've been in the energy field. Hopeful still, maybe one day, but not this decade. We're looking at the 2030 timeframe, by the way. So that also is different from the Project Drawdown approach that Paul Hawken used. He was looking at mid-century, and his project was done about 2 years ago. Mid-century, maybe 2 years ago, was considered, a good time frame. But for us, since then, so much evidence has materialized. This is a problem that can't await a long period. We need rapid solutions now. The second question is the solution, is there enough experience with it? For instance, here, tidal and wave energy off the coast of Georgia. it's technologically possible, but no real experience at this point in the Southeast. You could say wind offshore would fit into that category too. Then the third question is, can the solution reduce at least 1 million tons of CO2 equivalent by 2030? That is it big enough that we should pay attention to it? So for instance, alternative cement, an important solution, doesn't get you a 1 million ton reduction in the state of Georgia. By the way, the state of Georgia has a CO2 carbon footprint of about 130 million tons. So our 1 million ton threshold is saying, something like 1%. It's got to be at least able to deliver approximately 1% reduction for us to pay attention to it in this study. And then finally, is the solution cost competitive? For instance, here we eliminated solar power towers. These are the facilities that use mirrors to direct sunlight to conversion equipment on towers to run turbines and create electricity. They work very well in deserts and had a few work quite well in one of them in Florida. But anyway, we did not think that would be cost competitive in Georgia, given the low price of electricity in Georgia, for instance, one consideration. All right, here's the winning final 20 high impact solutions for the state. You can see they're color coded. 5 of them have to do with the electricity sector, 5 with transportation, several address buildings, 4 of them are addressing the food and ag sector, and 3 of them deal with land sinks. We've not talked about that. We will in just a minute, about the role that forest and ag soils can play in sequestering CO2. But really pleased with this list. We asked the question also, should any of these be eliminated because of other issues than their carbon impact? For instance, are some of them do any of them have other environmental vulnerabilities, liabilities that would cause them to be eliminated? Are any of them unattractive in terms of equity issues? Are any of them, do any of them have problems with dealing with waste streams? We did not eliminate any solutions for these other reasons, right? We thought that they're all, we can manage all of these problems with all 20 of these solutions. Any problem we could identify, equity, environment, jobs, were manageable. So we've kept them all. And here they are again, categorized and with our little caricatures here, our little icons for each of them. So we'll talk about some of these. While we were at it, remember I mentioned that you had to save at least 1 million tons of CO2 to meet our threshold. We call that a megaton. And it was fun to characterize each of the 20 solutions in terms of what a megaton would require. So it's just another way to compare and contrast. For instance, rooftop solar, to get a megaton of reduction, you'd need about 300,000 new 5 kilowatt home solar systems. 5 kilowatt home solar systems, about the average size. So that's 300,000. I forgot that Henry asked me, would I please talk about what percentage of the population? All right, let's see. We've got about 10 million people in Georgia, and maybe they're, I don't know, more than 500,000 homes. Anyway, it's a good percentage of homes that would need to have solar. For composting, we would have to divert 2 million tons of organic waste. And I believe I have a number here that says the total is 10 million tons. We'll see that in a minute of waste each year in Georgia. Alternative mobility, here I do have it as a percent. We'd have to eliminate 2.5% of our car trips by walking, by biking, or maybe by telecommuting or telemeeting like we're doing here today. So that's an interesting way to compare and contrast the solutions. So in trying to identify which ones could deliver how much carbon, we talk about the forecast for each of the solutions. That is this baseline forecast there at the bottom of the page here. That is, if there's no new action, what will happen to electric vehicles? Or what will happen to rooftop solar? Then you consider, well, what's the technical potential for this solution? And so just taking rooftop solar, for instance, here you would count up all the rooftops in the state of Georgia and imagine that they all had solar panels on them. That would be the maximum that you could deliver. And somewhere between the forecast and the maximum is a level of achievable potential that we tried to characterize as pushing on the technology and the marketplace, but achievable, nothing that could be considered outrageous. So for instance, growing solar farms from 1 to 11% of our electricity budget. You know, that's a lot from 1 to 11, but it's not the technical potential. We could do much more. We could meet all of our electricity needs with solar. It would be very costly because you'd have to match it with storage. But anyway, so that's the logic here. As you look at the forecast, you look at the technical potential and find an achievable level that you could justify as being possible. So for each of this 20 high potential solutions, we characterized how much CO2 they could reduce if they delivered the achievable penetration that we characterized. So here you see this, we call this a wedge diagram. You have 46 million tons of CO2 being taken up on an annual basis by our forests and soils. So that's the gray across the top. That doesn't change too much in our analysis. It dips down by a couple of, and expands by a couple of million tons. But here in this achievable scenario, going from left to right, you're going from 2017 over to 2030, we see the large scale uptake of solar farms here. Right, that's a solar farm icon. And a large contribution from energy efficient electric trucks. Here's the sequestration from forest and afforestation. And we have some other cogeneration, demand response, energy efficient buildings, you know, lots of contributions from these 20 solutions. And all together, they deliver a 35% reduction in the state's CO2 budget in the year 2030. They deliver a reduction of 43 million tons of CO2. This is generally on par with the Paris Accord. So our governor has the wherewithal to commit to the Paris Accord, given that we have shown that it is feasible and beneficial. Now, if you wanted to go further and ask what's the technical potential, we get into the realm of the unlikely, but still a fascinating thought experiment. Here, we have the potential to bring CO2 emissions down to the below zero threshold in the year 2030. And here we have the alternative mobility and energy efficient retrofitting of buildings and silvopasture here playing a big role. So here, maybe, you know, in this ideal world, Georgia might be able to deliver carbon offsets to other states that can't do as well as we do, bring some revenue to the state of Georgia. This is my most complicated chart. I apologize for it. I had meant actually to include one that had some graying out. I guess this does show this. The 20 solutions are listed along the horizontal axis, and they're arrayed by their cost, the cost per ton of reduction. So if you're below the line, it's actually a savings. If you're above the line, there's a cost. So reducing food waste is we identify as the most profitable solution among our 20. Cogeneration, likewise, delivers savings. Rooftop solar, recycling, energy efficient truck. Well, let's see. Composting, land. So these are all negative costs, i.e. savings, everything below the line. And you get into the sort of middle range here with a lot of action that just saves a little bit, but still very important. Retrofitting coastal wetlands, forest protection, silvopasture, demand response. Now we're building up to somewhere where the costs began to rise. The largest impact by the width of the band on the horizontal axis is large-scale solar. So this is more than 10 million tons of CO2 that could be saved for a price that ranges from, here we've got some uncertainty, possibly saving you money, possibly costing you something per ton, but not a lot. And altogether, the savings exceed the costs. So as a program, this type of 20 solution approach pays for itself. And so looking at the 20, I'm gonna talk a little bit about 7 of them here. Rooftop solar, utility scale solar, efficient trucks, electric vehicles, retrofitting, reduced food waste, and afforestation. We're going to spend some time studying these over the next 18 months. So that's why I wanted to share what we've learned thus far about how much they can deliver and at what price and how it might be most effective to activate these. So now we're getting into the mode over the next 18 months of looking at activation plans. So now we have an opportunity for a break. Should we take a minute and I'll come back? Give you all a chance to grab your next cup of coffee, including me.
We put this in, for those who don't know, because stretch breaks are very useful. Mm-hmm. What I do want to remind everyone of is we can, if you have questions that pop up as you're listening to Dr. Brown, put them in the chat or that you have from anybody else. And we can just respond in the chat very easily. Susan Clammer will be monitoring it for easy questions and hard ones, and she'll ask the hard ones when we're taking questions and answers at the end. So.
She'll give the hard ones to you, Henry, right?
Yep.
Hello, Henry.
All right.
Here you go.
I'll put a pretty picture up.
Oh, I was going to say hello from California right now. It's about 6:30 in the morning. So I'll be back in Georgia on the 30th. So I'll be looking forward to seeing you all.
That's dedication, 6:30. Ooh. Hi, Ted. Nice to see you. Ted Hines. Say hi to Jillian. Okay, so we divide these 20 solutions into 5 sectors. One big sector, of course, is electricity, and I took the lead in identifying these solutions and analyzing them. And Large scale solar, I mentioned the biggest opportunity in our assessment. One great thing about large scale solar benefits is that they are distributed predominantly throughout rural Georgia. So bringing economic, much needed economic development and jobs to places that are struggling and increasing their tax revenues at the same time. I know there are issues. There are issues of biodiversity or many issues.
I sent an email to Henry and he gave me a link.
With large scale solar farms, but they are affordable. And here you can see in the middle of this slide where we are today with Georgia's electricity mix. Solar's less than 2% currently. And on the right, some of the stats that we were talking about that could be achieved. Now, we modeled an increase in solar by adding a $10 per ton tax on CO2 and looked to see what would happen to the electricity sector if you do that. So this mix of electricity by source is the product of my modeling using the National Energy Modeling System from the Department of Energy. We're one of just the very few universities that uses it. It's a big deal, it's a big model. And you can see here how much utility scale solar grows compared to where it is today. The baseline forecast shows growth. Achievable shows that much growth. And for the larger technical potential, which we modeled as a $15 tax on carbon, a ton of CO2, it continues to penetrate the marketplace, largely displacing coal. So coal, of course, is the marginal fuel that gets retired with more solar farms. Okay, the second kind of highlighted solution is rooftop solar. And here you can see the distribution of rooftop solar is mostly urban, and it parallels in part the cities and metropolitan areas that have done solarized campaigns, which we have, and others, Savannah and Athens and many other cities have as well. So this is the current distribution of solar, but we only have less than 6,000 kilowatts of rooftop solar. That's between less than 2,000 systems currently installed, a very small percentage. I mentioned we need almost 300,000 such systems to generate a megaton. So a big push is going to be required for this technology to meet its megaton threshold. Lots of ways that can be achieved, and of course it needs to be achieved equitably. So we've got to have a solar for all dimension to how this plays out. Here's how we modeled the achievable potential of solar on rooftops. And here's how we got our estimated thresholds for 2030. Kind of fun. We use a logistic market growth modeling approach. For transportation, electric vehicles and energy efficient trucks made it to our short list. So electric vehicles, they use 50% less carbon than conventional vehicles. Their impact depends, of course, on the carbon intensity of the grid, and we've studied that. You get so much better reductions, so much larger carbon reductions with a carbon-free grid than you do with the grid of today. And here is the electric vehicle sales profile in Georgia. You can see, of course, when we had our state rebate, how much we added to our portfolio of vehicles, and how that's sort of tapered off. We need some more incentives like that to motivate consumers to purchase, because we have so many more models available today. This diagram here shows that impact with a better grid, a low carbon grid than with a high carbon grid. Energy efficient trucks, often an overlooked solution. People don't think much about trucking, although now we are, because we're all getting those UPS and Fed Express deliveries right to our doors. So we're going to be studying the role of urban trucking in this next series of studies, and asking how can it be transformed? How can we get electric trucks into the marketplace? Of course, we have UPS here headquartered, and looking at that same question, that we'll be partnering with them. So achievable potential is seen as quite large, partly because the federal standards for energy efficiency have mostly impacted cars and light duty trucks, SUVs. They've not done much. Their goals and the targets for efficiency that are mandated in fleets of trucks are very modest. So there is still a large economic potential to make trucks more efficient. They've not been well regulated. So now's the time. Here's our very own Candida building. So this is now buildings and materials, looking at retrofitting, refrigerant management, and recycling. And retrofitting in particular, I believe it has an extremely significant role going forward. So just some of the ways that we modeled what you could do in your home. Imagine a 20% uptake of smart thermostats and LED lighting and better installations, more advanced water heaters and more heat pumps. All of that put together drives a significant amount of emissions reductions. Now, achievable level, we modeled as 3 megatons, 2.6 megatons, but the technical potential is much greater at 14 megatons. So we need to make more affordable, more of these technologies more affordable, incentives, technology. This is going to be a major focus of the Biden administration. The Biden administration's executive order from 3 days ago asks for a relook at standards for efficiency in buildings. So there was a dialing back of the past administration on efficiency standards. And I imagine that we're not only going to be able to go back to where we were in the Obama administration, but hopefully be able to leapfrog, because we've got to leapfrog. We've lost 4 years, right? So we can't just go back to where we were. We've got to actually do more. I think that this is a great solution for space for that to happen in. Lots of fun things in Georgia in the food and ag sector. It was hard to pick between these 4: reduced food waste, conservation agriculture, a plant-rich diet, and composting. They're all easily achievable and could be significantly bumped up. Sudha Harmani led this from the University of Georgia and did a great job in looking at all 4 of these. So we're going to spend a little bit on reduced food waste, which is one of my favorites, in part because it helps deal with the food shortage that we're seeing across the country and Georgia and all across the world. So 2 million tons of food waste in Georgia. 30 to 40% of food is wasted in the retail and consumer levels. You can see some of what we waste is just because it's ugly. So we've got these ugly food programs that can do so much. Lots of obstacles that need to be overcome. We think that data-driven systems tracking food more closely where it is, what state it's in, will do a lot. And so you see the role of community food banks here in Atlanta and there in red, but across the state. The idea is that if we were to have a 20% reduction of the 2 million tons, we would have to prevent, recover, and recycle food. All three of these steps are going to be important, and there are different ways to reduce food waste at each step, different types of approaches. Another break. Okay, I'm going to, yep, stretch again.
This is Susan. I want to thank people for not sending, the easy, quote, easy questions. All the ones that are coming in look a little challenging, and Henry's been answering some of them.
Good.
Thank you. I've never done this before. This reminds me of teaching middle school, where my ADHD is going all over the place, trying to listen to Dr. Brown and your questions, but
yeah, this is how we teach anymore at Georgia Tech. You know, we're teaching and we're ourselves having to try to do the chat at the same time that we're trying to give the lecture. It is very hard.
it is. I really feel for the teachers who are teaching virtually now. I couldn't do it.
You could.
I would be muting everybody.
So land sinks include afforestation and silvopasture, which is pasturing cattle in wooded areas, coastal wetlands, and forest protection and management. And this was led by Jackie Mohan from University of Georgia, who reminds us that there are 3 ways that we can sequester carbon. One way is to throw it up into the atmosphere. Of course, that's what we're doing. We're using the atmosphere as our waste repository, which is why we have the problem we have. Another place you could put your CO2 is in the ocean. But of course, the oceans will become acidic, and carbonic acid will kill off our corals and is bad for our fish. The best solution is land ecosystem. So that's what we're focusing on. How best we can use our land to absorb carbon. And Georgia has a tremendous opportunity in the forest sector, with 58% of its land in forest, one of the largest of any state in the US. So here's a picture of what silvopasture looks like. And this is the solution that we've elected to attempt to examine further and promote. Jackie Mohan tells me how much happier cattle are when they're under a tree in the middle of the summer in Georgia. And why not use this land to also create carbon sinks through foresting? So significant ultimate impact here again, 14 million tons, achievable, we think at least close to 3. So planting 20% of our current pasture lands with mixed tree species, loblolly pines and hardwoods, would deliver 3 million tons of CO2 a year. So 20% of our pasture gives you 3 million tons. Just to think about the metrics and how doable that is. Seems achievable to me over the next decade. Then finally, our last topic that we divided our working teams into was beyond carbon. I mentioned we are considering impacts on the environment, economy, health, and equity. And Michael Oxman from the Racy Anderson Center for Sustainable Business led that effort. What we've done so far includes charting all of the issues that each of the solutions have relative to the dimensions of these 4 beyond carbon topics: air quality, water, land use, jobs, affordability, local economic impacts, workforce, job quality, wages, education, public safety, lots of very interesting topics here. And so many that I couldn't really tackle them in great detail, other than I wanted to share with you today numbers, and I do have draft by the title here, jobs. So I wanted to talk about jobs. I know from Henry that the Citizens Climate Lobby has a particular focus on equity. And we have a lot of interesting work on equity that I look forward to sharing with you sometime in the future. But I wanted at this moment in time to talk about jobs, because that also is a very fundamental anchor of the Biden administration's energy program. So energy efficiency there, front and center, this top pink box. Energy efficiency in Georgia currently employs 63,000 people who are out there delivering better windows, HVAC systems, doing a weatherization of your homes and commercial buildings, right? So this could grow significantly, and I'm working on a number for that pink box. I don't have it yet. Georgia's solar dropping down. Georgia's solar industry employs 6,500 people. Now just take a look at the comparison, 63,000 and 6,500. You know, solar jobs get all the attention. I am a lifelong advocate of energy efficiency, and it always is the one that's overlooked. You know, you don't have any bling with energy efficiency. How do I show it off? You can come and see my heat pump water heater, but boy, it's hard to get people to, when I bribe them with, a glass of Chardonnay, I can't get them down to my furnace and see my advanced equipment. It's just like it's there, it's hidden. So anyway, lots of reasons why efficiency gets overlooked, but it shouldn't be overlooked because of the jobs. But anyway, also many jobs can come from delivering rooftop solar. So that's that bottom green box. This could grow. We have 6,500 in the solar industry today. It could grow by an additional 2,400 jobs, each job lasting 10 years, with an expansion of rooftop solar as we've described it in that achievable scenario, right? So the achievable scenario is about 300,000 more homes with solar by the year 2030. Now, if you pivot to the right here, with an expansion of large scale solar, look at the job numbers. If we do all of the solar expansion through either community scale solar or solar farms or some other large scale solar approaches, which tend to be less expensive per gigawatt hour delivered, 20,800 jobs lasting 10 years would be created by the year 2030. And one of my other favorites is cogeneration and forest protection and automotive jobs as well from EVs. So we're working on some numbers. I think that Governor Kemp could potentially be moved by such numbers, and perhaps over the next few years, he might feel compelled to do something to help exploit the opportunity we have to grow jobs and grow our economy and tackle climate. So what are we doing now? And now that we've finished, we've sort of come to our end of our first phase, identifying the 20 solutions. Now we're going to move into the next phase, which is got a really interesting tracking component to it. So I'm working with the School of City and Regional Planning and some GIS experts there to track the greenhouse gas footprint of each of Georgia's counties, 159 counties, and its 15 metro areas. So in part, we're wanting to begin this sort of data-driven gamification, like, oh, you did that? well, maybe I can too over in my county. So I had a big study released about 10 years ago by the Brookings Institute, where I did carbon footprinting of the nation's 100 largest metro areas. And the morning that we released that report, activated hundreds, I think it was something like 300 newspaper stories across the country where cities were either defending or boasting how well they did in that list of 100, that rank ordering of 100. So I think there's, we don't want to shame and blame, but reward is good. And knowing what the reality is very important. So that's the number one task. We also want to engage business. So here, along with the Scheller College of Business at Georgia Tech, we're going to make the output of Drawdown Georgia accessible to business decision makers. We're going to try to stimulate their interest in a collective commitment, working together toward a level of CO2 emission reduction that they will come together and talk about through this sort of collective carbon goal. And then the third is evaluating, planning, and tracking activation of, actually, I should say 7 solutions. Some small number like 5 or 7. And that means by county, by metro area as well. And one way we're going to do that tracking and activation planning is using citizen science. So this is my last substantive slide. So we are using the Group It app to try to track projects and progress, challenges, impacts. This is an app that's available for your phone or your computer. If you come across something interesting, you'd ping Group It. You say, I just saw a really great new energy efficiency project. They're putting in new whatever over here, and you tell them where it is, or you say, boast what you're doing. There's a way also to get your projects in here, you get some credit for investments that you're making in our subset or any other types of drawdown actions. So to do this, you go to drawdown.org, take action to register your products. So last slide, I promised I would tell you where you could go if you wanted to see any of this in writing. One place you can go is to this article that was just published this month by Environmental Management. Very nice online, available to all, open access paper that describes how we got to our down select of 20 solutions for Georgia. Talks about the need for localization of solutions. And then you can go to my website here at Georgia Tech, which is this bottom one, the Climate and Energy Policy Lab. Lots of research detail here. If you want the more, the prettier version, a little bit higher level of overview of the project, see Drawdown Georgia. Here, this is what I meant to do. This is a fantastic site, which I'm looking at on my other screen. I got to get over here. Anyway, I'll let you do that on your own time, but it's a really active and colorful site with a lot of news about what we're doing in Drawdown Georgia. So thank you very much. Please stay in touch. Thank you for sharing your time with me and letting me explain all of this to you. And I look forward to hearing from you.
Hey.
Lots of great questions. You let me know, Henry, if this is the time.
No, this is not the time. Just, I wanted to close out on to say some things that Marilyn doesn't say directly, because we're here because we're concerned about climate change. And so here are 3 possible actions that I made up my slides for, and then we'll get to Q&A. So number one, act to cut your fossil fuel use. So energy efficient appliances, very important. Home weatherization, help keep those 63,000 people employed. Rooftop solar. I'm sure many of us have solar on our roof already. Electric vehicles, another big winner. And obviously reducing food waste is huge for the state. And if you're in the food industry already, in any place in the food industry, growing it, preserving it, serving it in restaurants, whatever, or grocery stores, you can think about how you might contribute to that project. Another big important thing is to talk about climate action, because when we talk to members of Congress as CCL, we say, well, nobody's really asking us. And so we have to make that happen. Citizens Climate Lobby actually has a monthly calling campaign, so they hear from somebody different every day of the month. But just talking to friends and relatives, business owners, political leaders, use your social media, let people know that it's an issue. And then one third possible action is to join a group, because this is much more effective. There's a guy in my neighborhood. He stands at the corner of Claremont and North Decatur sometimes with a sign. And you know what? I don't think he's very effective. I say that because I don't remember what the sign says. But when you join a group, you can focus your efforts. You can do a number of things. So there are a number of wonderful groups in the state, and I'm not going to overly promote any of them, but just be aware of that. So questions and answers. Type any more questions you have into the chat. There's the web address and the contact information for Drawdown, and Susan will be reading some of these questions off.
One question, Dr. Brown, will these slides are we able to access them? And a related question, is Georgia the first to build on the drawdown information? First state, that is?
Thank you so much for that last question. Yes, we are. We are the first state to create this systematic look at what Project Drawdown means for us. Yeah. So we are doing it in part with the support of Ray C. Anderson to be a model for other states. So now we've got these steps and underpinning those steps, a lot of calculations and spreadsheets and models and stuff that anyone can use and put in their state data and do the same thing. Already I'm talking to Alabama, wants to do the same thing for, and of course, logically should fit nicely there. But in the state of Georgia, we have so much diversity. We've got the mountains down to the marshlands and the ocean and the, farming and the big cities. We have everything. We represent really nicely opportunities throughout the US. So it's a great place. Yes, the slides are going to be posted on my website probably on Monday. And the website that do you see the very bottom one there? That's the one you'll find them on, the cepl.gotech. Is there a way, Henry, that we could send a message out with that link when I have them posted?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, let's wait till I get it posted and then we'll send that out and people will be able to get there easily.
Well, we also have been recording this, so I can send a link to that record out as well.
Okay, great.
But I have the list of people, so even if they weren't able to be here today, they can still see it.
Good.
All right, and I see at least one question about food waste. The question is, does food waste reduction encompass everything from farm to compost heap, or does it start with the consumer?
Oh no, it's I think something like a third of the food waste occurs either in the field or as it's going into transportation to the marketplace. So yeah, this whole effort in food waste is going to be comprehensive. Yeah.
All right. And we had a couple questions about, I think they were answered in the chat room, but did you consider how these solutions interact with each other?
Oh yeah.
I think one of the ones was with solar. And Henry, I think you answered that, but the biggest interaction? Well, I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, we have. There are 3 that we've looked at in particular. One that as Henry said, EVs and solar farms, but also solar farms or solar rooftop and efficiency, right? Retrofitting buildings. This is a really difficult interaction because it makes you wonder, if you go all electric through rooftops with storage, then do you really care how efficient your home is? I'm now looking at Ted because he and I both have very good rooftop and storage, and I also have a very efficient house. I bet he does too. But you wonder about the future of efficiency in a energy economy with so much clean electricity. So if you go all electric, clean electricity, then so we did consider that interaction, and we estimated a significant reduction to the CO2 emissions that retrofitting buildings would produce in a new clean energy economy.
Okay, and a question, I hope I get this right, is how much would this prediction change with the carbon price in place? And I don't know which prediction Jeff, you were talking about.
Yeah, the baseline forecast is meant to be a representation of what current policies will be doing to motivate these solutions. And right now, the policies are very modest. If there were to be a carbon price, then our baseline forecast would bump up in terms of the impacts of these solutions, or actually reduction. There'd be a reduction in emissions because of that tax. So then the extra effort needed to go further, say to get 35% reduction by 2030, would be less, right? So you'd be talking about the marginal impact that's needed beyond a carbon tax. I do think a carbon tax is critical. I also think it's not the entire policy solution. We need a package. We need incentives, especially to deal with the equity problem, getting everyone involved and helping to modernize all of our homes and businesses.
Thank you. And that may relate to a couple people had questions about policy ideas that are out there for making solar affordable for low-income Georgians beyond the carbon pricing.
Yeah, that is a great question. So there are all kinds of contractual arrangements being studied whereby tenants can be participants in the solar rooftop investments of landlords. So there's a sort of landlord-tenant relationship where they work together. So that's one route. Another is that there are a number of low-income communities in other states, Colorado and Massachusetts and California, where they're looking at providing the ability for low-income households to purchase solar located at community scale solar projects, located, in their community, off-site, on the ground solar, as opposed to rooftop solar. So you can buy the equivalent of a rooftop system, but you're buying a piece of a community project. So having that type of participation as well. I mean, subsidizing solar for all is a great way to go. Just add, solar, by the way, now with the Energy Act of 2020 that was passed at the end of the last congressional last Congress, the weatherization, low-income weatherization program now for the first time can use solar rooftops as a as a legitimate investment. First time. This program has been around for 40 years and has never pre-approved the use of renewables. Now it does. So in the year 2021, that program, which is one of the largest efficiency programs in the world, will now be able to help to put rooftop solar on homes of low-income Americans. So that's a really big step. And their budget's been increased.
All right, and we have a question. Did you estimate the impact, the co-benefits, not just saving money, on all these solutions? An example was transitioning to clean power, electric vehicles, on air quality, reduced need for healthcare.
Yes. Yes, indeed. We have a lot of estimation of air quality improvements and public health cost reductions. You know, we've done a lot of that. It is big. So now back to the low-income weatherization program I had mentioned. Another piece of the Energy Act of 2020 was that the government can now monetize the benefits of public health to its investments in low-income weatherization. That is unheard of. I mean, I know that well. I wrote a report for the Department of Energy. I recommended that that be used, and I actually was given a tip that it was being discussed, and I thought, yeah, let's get that in my report. It was implemented, and now in 2021, the public health benefits from the federal government's investment in low-income weatherization will be part of the calculation of the return on investment. That's so important when you're competing for appropriations. You've got to show that the return on investment for weatherization is as big as for anything else that the government is trying to do.
Okay, a couple questions related to agriculture. Are there any current Georgia incentives for agriculture to be less carbon producing? I
don't know that I can answer that completely. There are USDA programs that support clean energy and energy efficiency, but I don't know the details of them. So I probably shouldn't go out on a limb and guess, but I do know that the types of equipment investments, for instance, no-till and round bales and that make up some of our solutions are very well known but expensive because they require new equipment. So how to fund that transition is going to be important to consider. All right, we've had a couple questions. Dr. Brown, have you looked at the interactive En-ROADS climate model? Not in detail. I know about it. And I think that you had a meeting on it last week, was it, or a week before? Yeah, sorry, I missed that. Yep. Can't do a head-to-head with it. No, we've pretty much absorbed all of the existing data that there is to be found on Georgia. So we're not using the En-ROADS model, but we certainly are using all of the same data.
Well, I'll speak briefly to that, just that En-ROADS is designed to almost like a video game. The goal is how low can you get the temperature in 2100 globally? And so you can raise electric vehicles or save tropical forests or build 800 nuclear plants or, put a price on oil or, there's a lot of little things you can do in this model and then you see what happens in 2100 and you learn that nuclear power plants, according to the model, are not as good as we think just because it will take at least 15 years to build them. If Georgia Power's in charge, maybe 25 years. Sorry, that's a joke. But it allows you to compare the effects and see that there is no silver bullet, as they say, but there is silver buckshot. a lot of things you can do that can help lower global temperatures. And there's a version of this will be presented to the Georgia legislature on Monday at 11. I say to the legislature, to members of the legislature who are interested.
Excellent.
And if you want your member of the legislature to know about it, they all got invitations, but you can send them a note yourself and stress it. And
we're going to have a tool. We actually have a tool already for our 20 solutions where you can choose business as usual, achievable, or technical potential between now and 2030, and you can create your own subset and look at the impacts. So that's also something we have. It's being kind of gussied up, and it'll be ready for public unveiling soon.
Okay, we have a specific question. Have you studied the growth of hemp as a carbon sink? Hope I said that right.
Yep. So hemp, I have not, but I know that it was. Hemp is mentioned in the Project Drawdown, and so our UGA folks looked at that, but they didn't feel that it was a big enough, option to meet our 1 megaton limit. But I think, by the way, we need all options. So just because we don't pick it up doesn't mean it's not good.
All right, and can you explain a little more about cogeneration? What does that include?
Okay, cogeneration is the co-production of heat and electricity, typically at an industrial site, but it's also being used in commercial buildings and soon will be used in residential homes. So it's mostly so far been an industrial process. And in Georgia, it's used in almost all of the pulp and paper industry. So they're burning the pulp and they're burning the wood, and in order to, so let's see, in the process of pulping, they create a lot of heat. You take the heat and instead of just letting it evaporate to the atmosphere, you put it into a turbine, a single or double cycle electricity generator, and you create electricity at the pulp and paper mill. So you're using not just the product and anyway, you're creating both paper or diapers or whatever, and you're creating electricity. Typically, those sites can create more electricity than they need. So for instance, I was involved, and I was a regulator for 8 years at the Tennessee Valley Authority that also regulated parts of most of Alabama, although not Birmingham. Anyway, the Weyerhaeuser plant in Alabama had so much electricity that they had to negotiate with their power provider to get the power provider to purchase their excess electricity. That was quite a difficult negotiation. There is no obligation under rule of law of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that a power provider has to purchase excess electricity from a customer. And in that case, there was no obligation. I did help to make it happen. There was a contract finally put in place. But one of the reasons that cogeneration is seen as a big opportunity is because there are all of these regulatory and other complicated contractual problems that prevent it from being adopted. And yet it is such a powerful way to use wasted heat to create electricity that essentially is pollution free, because you've already done the burning of the wood or the burning of the natural gas, whatever it is, it's creating heat. You're just capturing that heat and now producing electricity. So there are now home systems, which I'm very excited to learn about. Oak Ridge National Laboratory has a CRADA, a Cooperative Research and Development Agreement with a producer of a home level cogeneration system So here's a case where with the size of a water heater, you can heat your home, heat your water, and produce electricity from the waste heat from the production of hot water and heat for your home heating system. It is going to be really transformational. So not only do we have the ability to have electric sort of with the systems available now, you can go off grid, right? You could go off grid with a natural gas cogen home system like that too. You could be independent of your utility because you'd have everything you need. You have to buy the natural gas, but from there on, you've got everything.
And here's a question I meant to bundle with talking about political will. At least with CCL, I think we focus more on a national level. This question is, are there any solutions that the state legislature might be most interested in driving through, to turn into a policy?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the policies, of course, a state clean transportation standard would be good. California has one. The state of Virginia is considering one. The Green Link Analytics Group, which is headquartered in Atlanta, did that study for Virginia. So that would mean requiring that the fleets run in fleets of cars and trucks in Georgia have a certain minimum CO2 emission standard that require more efficient cars and trucks. That would be something. It's been done at the state level. I think that action in terms of carbon offset markets would be good as well. Companies are interested, businesses are interested in knowing if they can kind of buy an offset, which will allow them to neutralize their emissions at their plants, right? So, okay, you can't take your emissions all the way down. It's just too expensive, perhaps in whatever business you're in, but could they invest in more acreage of forests or more silvopasture? So I think that the state legislature should become more active in the creation of a carbon market so that businesses can find a way to buy and sell offsets.
Right. And I have a question. I'm not sure if it's for Dr. Brown or for anyone. It says the Southern Company is using a carbon price of $50 per ton for modeling energy demand and production. Is that a suitable price?
That's the price that was estimated by the interagency panel under President Obama. The past administration cut that estimate down to $5 per ton CO2. And in the executive order that I mentioned that was signed a few days ago, the president has dictated the reassessment of the price of the cost, the social cost of carbon. I expect it's going to bump up again to something around 50 from the $5 that was used under Trump. And that will make so much more action justifiable from the policy review process in Washington.
And we have a question on training. Are there solar installation training programs in Georgia technical schools?
I don't know, but I do know that Emory has started. I know they're not a technical school, but they have embraced working with a solar company and on a solar training program. I can give you, whoever would like, the name of that contact person.
And
go ahead.
South Base, many of us are familiar with South Base Energy Institute, located on Pine Street downtown. They have for years done training for all sorts of installation work, but especially focused on the energy efficiency.
Yep.
use it. So I don't think they have done any solar training yet.
They haven't, but they need to. It is a real need.
Yeah.
We need a trained workforce. We need a more diverse workforce. It's almost all white males, you know, like 95% white males. And there's no real reason for that.
I like that response. This is a question, I hope I'm asking it right. How are you thinking about the other environmental challenges with renewable energy equipment and storage? That is mineral and element extraction required for these technologies. If I didn't say it right, somebody write that to me again.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of issues dealing with extraction of lithium and other minerals that are needed for some of the equipment that we use in clean energy. And most of that extraction is not occurring in the US. So when it's purchased by US companies, there need to be qualifications put on their extraction processes to the extent that they can modify how other countries run their mines.
Well, I'm going to use moderator's privilege just because I've also seen people saying, well, these giant wind turbines are great, but what are we going to do in 20 or 40 years with these, you know, super long blades? And part of me is thinking, well, the difference between, you know, one long blade and the amount of carbon it replaced that we've been burning. Do you have any sense of the scale of that, Dr. Brown?
You always ask difficult questions like that to put things into perspective. Gosh, I don't know. I'll have to think about it, Henry. How much the volume of CO2 versus the size of a wind blade. Yeah, good question.
Well, you have a lot of graduate students or others that you can just say, here, calculate this.
Yep.
Can you talk about the impact of the collaboration? Let me see if I can get this right. The collaboration, the impact it's having, the collaboration with university and the impact it's having on the state?
So the there are 3 universities involved in the Drawdown Georgia that have signed an agreement to work together. So we did get high-level provost or presidential signatures. So that was nice. So they've committed. There's no problem, though, of course, with our university's commitment to clean energy. The universities across Georgia are committed to sustainability. A lot of them have signed the pact, various university pacts. As to the impact in Georgia, well, of course, we over the past 2 years that we've been at Drawdown Georgia, we have taught hundreds of students using Drawdown Georgia exercises. I'm teaching a course now, 60 graduate students with a colleague, and we're using Drawdown Georgia as an important exercise that they're all going to be doing calculations, like a wind turbine calculation. I'll throw that in somehow. But I think through our students, we're making a big impact. But that's a long, that takes a while to then realize change in the economy. So, and we've had, I'd say, no influence thus far on policy because we've not really dealt with policy options. We've been looking at technology. We're sort of like the science behind COVID-19. We're the science behind climate change solutions. We do need to get more engaged as individuals. I, as an individual here with you this morning, is an example of my going beyond my Georgia Tech role, right? I need to do more of that, and we all do on the team, yeah.
There are a lot of other questions. I'm not sure that I'm going to get to them, but I have to ask this one. Can we invite Stacey Abrams to a future similar presentation? That's for you, Henry, I guess.
I didn't ask that one.
No, I know. I'm just, who answers that question?
That's a wonderful question. And I think, well, we don't have any contacts with her that I know of. So.
I didn't ask the question, but I can be a contact. I'm looking at the time, and Henry, you tell me how much more.
Oh, about 3 more minutes.
All right.
So Susan, if I can jump in on that.
Okay.
I've been telling my friends and colleagues that I really think that our current governor needs to be briefed, and we need to figure out where he stands and what he's doing. So I was really glad to hear that the legislature's listening to inroads, but is the governor listening? Has he been briefed? And I think that's an important step to take.
All right.
And my friends and colleagues often say, oh, but that's, you know, that's red and not blue. But it is our leadership. And I know you are all bipartisan. And so I would ask the question, how do we invite our governor to a meeting like this?
All right. I am hoping I'm asking this one correctly. This was going back to energy equipment and storage. Is it a problem being dependent on other countries for lithium? And I hope I asked that correctly.
There have been some discoveries of lithium reserves in the United States lately. So I'm re-encouraged, you know, that I think we might be able to not just be changing from our dependence on OPEC nations to dependence on lithium nations, maybe be able to produce some of our own as well.
All right, and related to reaching out to the governor and others, are you reaching out to local municipalities to encourage and support clean energy and sustainability efforts?
So the bigger project of which I'm the head of this research, the larger project that the Racy Anderson is funding many actors to support, that project is trying to create a movement. And the movement does involve reaching out to communities and to everyone and to business and to the state. Yeah. So I personally am just doing what I can while having a full daytime job. But obviously, I think we all want to help. So yes, a lot's being done. Check out that website there. Okay. I think people will see that there's quite a bit of activity.
And that question may not have just been for you. It may have been for really all of us. And Henry, I know you're a stickler for time. I'm giving it back to you.
Great, thank you. So the 2 things I wanted to close with, well, I will say, just remember those 3 ideas. Act to reduce your own level of carbon use. Talk to your friends and neighbors, not to be obnoxious. You know, don't be that crazy uncle at Thanksgiving. And join a group. And if you're interested in more about CCL, the 5 Levers workshop is next Saturday. I put the link into the chat as well, but it's georgiaflow.eventbrite.com. So this has been delightful, Dr. Brown. We want to thank you so much for your
expertise. Thank you.
And for taking this opportunity and for listening to me to simplify some of your slides so that, because we don't need to see how you made the determination. We just need to know, yes, food waste is gigantic. Yes, solar panels on rooftops are gigantic.
Yeah, that was good feedback. Thank you, Henry.
So I want to thank everyone for being here. We will, on Monday, God willing, I'll have the link to Dr. Brown's slides, and I'll also send out the recording link at that time to everyone who registered. And yeah, It's 10:30. Thanks so much. Happy day.
Thank you, guys.
You all, I just copied the chat, so I'll be able to read through some of what everyone said. Appreciate
Okay.
your remarks. Great.
All right.